Hello again everybody, hope you're all doing well. So in my previous video a little while back I introduced the new addition to my garage, which is this scooter that I bought for my wife. So today I thought I would kind of catch you guys up a little bit on what I've done to it, because there's a number of things I've done since getting the scooter, and talk a little bit about future plans for it as well. So first and foremost, for anyone who didn't see the previous video, this is a Yuki Jet 50. So it's a Chinese 50cc two-stroke single cylinder unit. The engine is a copy of the Marini engine, which was found in older Suzuki's, Italjets, Aprilias, and lots of other things, TGB, many other scooters. So parts really cheap and easy to find. So yeah, what have I actually done to this thing? Well, the first thing was, I mentioned in the previous video, when I actually got this, it was completely in pieces and the cylinder and piston were completely blown. So obviously I replaced those, put it all back together, gave it a good clean because it had been sitting in a woodshed for several years, really dusty and whatever. Obviously I had to clean out the fuel system because that had been sitting for God knows how long as well. So I got it all back together. Next thing was just to give it a bloody good service. So I've done everything. I've changed the oil in the front forks. I've checked the brake pads. The brake pads are actually pretty good, as is the disc, but obviously I gave them a good clean. I bled out and completely replaced the brake fluid. What else have I done? New rollers in the Variator, although I must say the transmission was actually in pretty good condition. So again, I didn't have to do too much on that front. But yeah, so it's had a really good service. So that brings us on to modifications. Now, the first kind of big thing I did, because this scooter was still in its restricted form, so it had a top speed of about 45 kilometers an hour, which is, what is that? 45 Ks is, yeah, it's like 27 miles an hour, something like that. So obviously I wanted to de-restrict it. That involved taking the casing off the transmission, taking the variator off and removing a washer which prevented the variator from allowing the belt to travel its full travel. So that was that. I also put lighter variator rollers in. I do at some point want to replace the variator with a, not sports, but certainly aftermarket one with slightly better ramps to smooth out the transition in the transmission. But otherwise, the standard variator is actually performing pretty well, so took the restriction off there. The next thing I did was actually to put a... I'll show you this. So what we have here is a... I don't want to say sports exhaust because it's not like a race exhaust or anything, but it's certainly more sporty than the standard exhaust. Even though one thing I really love about this is it looks like the standard exhaust, and actually the sound, if anything, is slightly quieter than the original, although that might just be because the baffling in the original exhaust are completely gone. So yeah, it's really quiet, but yeah, that's a Yasuni Eco exhaust system, and I would say it improves the performance quite a bit over standard. Certainly the mid-range and low-range power is really good. You get that fantastic two-stroke thing that it has an okay amount of power in the sort of low RPMs, and then it gets into a certain RPM and the power really kicks in, because, you know, that is even as it looks standard, it is a sports-ish exhaust system. As I say, it's not going to give you the same boost of power as a full-on race exhaust, like a, I don't know, I think it's the Yasuni R or something, or the Leovince ZX, that kind of stuff. Those, you know, full-on Scorpion-style expansion chambers will give you more power at higher RPMs. This gives you a good amount of power at low to mid RPMs, which is kind of what you want for the road. And also, we've got to bear in mind that although I'm kind of tuning this a little bit to go faster and whatever, I still want to try and keep it relatively reliable, because and not too fast, because it's my wife that uses it. I actually really enjoy this thing. I do take it out quite a lot, but it is hers, so obviously I don't want to make it unrideable for her, especially as she's only just now started to ride, and she does go out on this thing. She goes to church on it, she goes, you know, wherever. But yeah, obviously. So next modification, because the exhaust, although it's for a Marini engine, it's not technically for this bike. So I had to slightly, actually had to drill a different hole into the bracket. You can't see, but you'll just have to take my word for it that I just had to drill a hole slightly lower down to fit it. But that meant the factory airbox, which was originally on this side, didn't fit. So what I've gone and done is actually taken the airbox off of a 4-stroke, just some other Chinese 50cc scooter, and put it on this side. So it's all completely solid, it's all connected to the carburetor as normal, and it's a standard airbox. It's just off a slightly different bike to allow the space for that exhaust to go on. And then the only other thing I've done, like performance tuning wise, is to change the jetting in the carburetor, obviously with a different exhaust, and even as it's a factory airbox, it's still a slightly different airbox. So I just changed the main jet and the pilot jet. I'd say it took me probably 5 or 6 attempts with different jets to get it just right. But now it's perfect. Literally, it starts on the button. It's beautiful. So that's great. The actual carburetor itself and the cylinder and the piston and everything else are all completely standard. So 50cc with I think it's a 12mm carburetor. But yeah. So with that setup, this thing now actually gets up to 76 kilometers an hour, which is probably about 40, what's that? Probably about 46 miles an hour, something like that. No, 47 miles an hour. But at this point, it doesn't feel like it's being restricted by the power. It actually feels like it will carry on going. What it feels like is the gearing's the restriction. Now, I know on these Marini engines, they're geared more for acceleration than top speed. So obviously that's a limiting factor as far as going a bit faster on top speed. But I do also feel like the factory Variator, because it's got quite shallow ramps, and like they only go about halfway up and then basically there's a stop. So whereas the aftermarket ones, the ramps carry on a bit further up. So there's a possibility that I might be able to eke just another couple of miles an hour out of it with a different Variator. I'm not actually aiming for anything particularly fast. If I can get it to do about 80 k's an hour or 50 miles an hour, I'd be happy with that. I mean, you wouldn't know without attaching a GPS to it if you were going any faster anyway, because the speedo only goes up to that. Now, as far as the accuracy of this speedo, because everyone always says about them being hideously inaccurate, especially 50cc's, this one's actually not too bad. I've had it past those laser speed trap things that show how fast you're going, and I've also followed it on my other bike, which I've set up the speedo on this using GPS, and actually this isn't too bad. It's only like 1 or 2 miles an hour out, so if it says it's doing about 50, it's probably doing about, I don't know, maybe 48, 47. That's more than fast enough for around here. I mean, most of the speed limits around here are about 30 miles an hour anyway, so it's not about going fast. It's just so we can have a bit of fun. So what else have I done to this thing? Right, the only other thing I've done for the minute is just add a voltmeter down here, which I've actually got. Funny enough, this originally was the light switch, but I've recently changed it to the lights being on all the time. So obviously you can go from high beam to low beam, but they're just on all the time because on a motorcycle I feel like that's safer anyway. So I've repurposed the light switch here, which as you can see is already an aftermarket one because the original broke, so that I can turn this thing on and off. And the reason I've done it like that, because I could have had it just come on with the ignition, but I wanted to be able to check the battery voltage whilst everything was turned off, and then obviously when the scooter's on and running I can see what the charging system's doing and whatever else. So that's just a neat little feature that allows me to monitor the electrical system without having to crack out the multimeter every 5 minutes. I did actually also, it's covered up, so here is a quick connect which I've connected to the battery, because the battery's in here. You have to unscrew this and take this off. This is just a quick connect just above the fuel filler, and you can see I've covered it in a plastic thing, so it's just for a safety thing, like, because obviously that's electrics and maybe some vapor or something from the petrol might get up if there's a spark. I know it's highly unlikely, but I'd just rather be safe than sorry. So what I've got, that's a quick connect, and over here, get this out of the way, we actually have this is the other part of the connector. So I connected this in, and then I've deliberately made the positive longer than the negative so that it doesn't short on itself. And then I can, attach the multimeter to that to check the battery directly, or I can attach the, charger to it if I want to top it up or something. It's just a bit of convenience, really. So then lastly, something which is kind of in progress. So this pipe here, now originally, let me grab it. Originally, there was this oil tank sitting in here, which it's like a 1.2 litre capacity. Now, I've actually gone ahead and deleted that because I prefer to pre-mix the fuel. So I just pre-mix the fuel and put it straight in. I don't bother with the automatic lube system. And so because I wasn't using that for oil, I decided to make a secondary tank system. And how that works is basically you've got the normal fuel pump. So before the fuel pump, where you've got the input from the main petrol tank, which is down in here, what I've done, don't know if you guys can see this, give it a go. Tell you what, let's grab a torch, there we go. So you should be able to see just up in there is a petrol tap, and that's got a reserve function. So basically, in its current position, which is down, it's drawing fuel from the main tank, but when it's in its up position, it draws fuel from this, which is currently blanked off, but that does have a fuel filter and everything else on it. I will show this in more detail, this system, in the next video, because I'm going to be doing some upgrades to this. As I said before, I was using the original oil tank, which sat here, for a spare fuel tank, but it's only 1.2 litres, which is a bit small. So what I've actually got is a 5.5 litre fuel tank auxiliary tank, which is going to sit in here, because this space is not actually deep enough to put even a half-face helmet in. So we put the helmets in the top box. So this space kind of isn't really being used for too much. So the 5.5 litre tank will sit in this section here, and I'll still have a section here to put some stuff, but it will just add, I don't know how much capacity, because I don't know how many litres the original tank is. I think it's probably 6 litres, or maybe even about 5.5. So I'm almost doubling the fuel capacity by doing that. And basically, how it works is, obviously, if you start to run out of fuel, or you run out of fuel on the main tank, you just reach under there and switch it to the auxiliary tank, and off you go for another, I don't know, however many kilometres. I'll have to do a range test when I actually get it all installed, but that's the plan on that one. And then, as I was saying with the transmission, I plan to stick a different variator in there, and I think that'll be it pretty much done. There's obviously, you could go down the road of putting a big ball kit on it and changing all this other stuff, but I kind of, like I said, want to keep it relatively reliable for what it is. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm under no illusions that this is like the best scooter in the world. It is Chinese, but I do maintain it well. It does run well, and, if I look after it and mostly don't rag it around everywhere, which obviously my wife doesn't because she's a learner anyway, it should last a decent amount of time, I imagine. So there you go, guys. As I say, next video will be about installing that auxiliary fuel tank and whatever else. But for now, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, do give it a like. Please subscribe to the channel. Go check out my other videos. There's over 100 on the channel at this point, as far as I can remember. Yeah, about 109, 110. So yeah, go check those out. And for now, I'll catch you again soon.